The crimson sunset bled across the desert city's skyline, casting long shadows over the scattered metal ruins. Heat shimmered above the sand, distorting the horizon like a mirage. Amidst this desolation stood Varya, her silhouette cutting a sharp figure against the dying light. Varya was unmistakably of the Highland tribe, her sun-bronzed skin marked with the intricate patterns that spoke of lineage and honor. Her eyes narrowed against the persistent desert grit. Sweat traced clean lines through the dust on her face, but she paid it no mind. Her attention was focused entirely on the ancestral blade in her grip, its edge catching the last rays of sunlight. The weight of expectation hung heavy on her shoulders. The tribal system was unforgiving in its rigidity. To prove her honor and secure her position, she needed to return with an enemy's head. Not just any enemy, a specific one. The one who had humiliated her tribe in a border negotiation gone sour. The one known as Kyle. Tales of Kyle had spread through the desert settlements like wildfire. A wandering spy with a mysterious smile and storm-gray eyes. A man who moved like the wind and left chaos in his wake. Finding him had consumed Varya's days and nights for weeks. And now, tracking him through the canyon's labyrinthine passages, she felt the thrill of the hunt nearing its conclusion. The canyon walls rose on either side, their rust-colored stone carved by millennia of wind and rare flash floods. Perfect for an ambush. Varya's footsteps were silent on the loose gravel, her breathing controlled despite the rising anticipation. Every sense was heightened, attuned to the slightest disturbance in the arid air. There, a shadow moved where it shouldn't. Varya lunged forward with practiced precision, her blade flashing in the dimming light. In one fluid motion, she had her target pinned against the canyon wall. The ancestral blade pressed firmly against his throat. Kale didn't struggle. Instead, he met her fierce gaze with startling calm, those storm-gray eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. The stories hadn't exaggerated his appearance. He was handsome in a dangerous way, with wind-tousled dark hair and a face that seemed perpetually on the verge of sharing a secret joke. "Any last words?" Varya demanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. This was the moment she had trained for, the kill that would cement her status among her people. Kale's lips curved into a smile that was both infuriating and inexplicably charming. "Yeah," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "You're holding it wrong." Confusion flickered across Varya's face. A momentary lapse in concentration. In that split second, Kyle moved, not to attack, but with a subtle shift of his body and a gentle tap of his finger against a specific point on her wrist. Before Varya could comprehend what was happening, the ancestral blade slipped from her grasp, clattering uselessly to the canyon floor. The sound echoed between the stone walls, a mocking reminder of her failure. Varya lunged for the weapon, but Kyle was already beyond her reach, watching her with those enigmatic eyes. "How?" she began, fury and embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Like I said," Kale replied, his tone neither gloating nor threatening. "You were holding it wrong." And then, with a slight nod that might have been respect, he turned and vanished into the shadows of the canyon. Varya stood frozen, the reality of what had just occurred slowly sinking in. She had failed. Failed herself. Failed her tribe. And worse, much worse, she had been humiliated without Kale even drawing a weapon. He could have killed her, but instead, he had chosen to teach her a lesson she didn't understand. The journey back to the tribal encampment was a blur of shame and bitter resolve. Varya knew what awaited her: the disappointed eyes of the elders, the whispers of her peers, the subtle but unmistakable loss of standing. In a society where strength was everything, she had been found wanting. Elder Rail was waiting at the perimeter, his weathered face a map of the desert itself. His eyes, still sharp despite his advanced age, took in her empty hands and the unusual set of her shoulders. You found him, the elder stated. It wasn't a question. Varya nodded once, her jaw tight. And lost him. The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken implications. Finally, Elder Rail sighed, the sound as dry as the desert wind. Tell me. So she did, recounting every detail of the encounter, even the humiliating ease with which Kale had disarmed her. Honor demanded truth, even when truth brought pain. When she finished, Elder Rail's expression was unreadable. What did he mean? You're holding it wrong. I don't know, Varya admitted, frustration evident in her voice. My grip was perfect. The form was exactly as I've been taught. Perhaps, the elder mused, that is precisely what he meant. Before Varya could ask for clarification, the elder turned away. You know what this means for your standing. The tribal laws are clear. Indeed they were. Failure in a mission of honor meant relegation, loss of privileges, and potentially exile if she couldn't redeem herself. The tribal system had functioned this way for generations, ensuring only the strongest survived and led. I will find him again, Varya promised, her voice steel. Elder Rail paused. Perhaps, but first, you might consider finding out what he meant. With those cryptic words, the elder left her at the threshold of the encampment, alone with her thoughts and the lingering mystery of Kale's words. The following days were as difficult as Varya had anticipated. Her rations were reduced, her sleeping quarters moved to the outskirts of the encampment, her voice silenced in tribal councils. She bore it all with stoic dignity, focusing instead on understanding what had happened in that canyon. In the privacy of her new, smaller tent, Varya practiced with her blade for hours, analyzing every aspect of her grip, her stance, her approach. Everything seemed correct according to her training, yet Kale's words haunted her. You're holding it wrong. On the 5th night after her failure, a shadow fell across the entrance to her tent. Expecting another tribal member come to subtly gloat, Varya was surprised to find Nara instead. Nara was something of an enigma in the tribe, tolerated for her exceptional skills as a healer, but viewed with suspicion for her frequent travels beyond tribal lands. Now she slipped into Varya's tent with a furtive glance over her shoulder. I hear you met Cole, Nara said without preamble, her voice low. Varya tensed. News travels fast. Faster than you think. Nara settled cross-legged on the ground, studying Varya with keen eyes. He's not what the tribe believes him to be. And what would you know of it? Varya challenged, though curiosity tempered her tone. Nara smiled, a quick flash of teeth in the dim light. Enough to know that if he wanted you dead in that canyon, you wouldn't be sitting here now. The words hung in the air between them, undeniable in their truth. Why did he let me live? Varya finally asked, voicing the question that had plagued her since the encounter. Perhaps he saw something in you worth preserving. Nara leaned forward. If you truly want to understand what he meant about your grip, you'll need to leave the tribal lands. That's forbidden without elder approval. Sometimes, Nara said carefully, the most valuable lessons lie beyond the boundaries we're taught never to cross. Varya studied the healer, weighing her words against a lifetime of tribal indoctrination. You know him, don't you, Kale? Nara's expression revealed nothing. I know many people from many places. Knowledge is my currency. She rose to leave, but paused at the tent entrance. 3 days from now, there's a supply run to the western outpost. The guards change at dusk. If someone wanted to slip away unnoticed, that would be the time. With that, she was gone, leaving Varya with even more questions than before. For 2 days, Varya deliberated, torn between tribal loyalty and burning curiosity. On the 3rd day, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, she made her decision. With minimal provisions and her ancestral blade secured at her hip, she slipped past the changing guards and into the vast desert beyond. Freedom tasted like dust and uncertainty. Having never ventured far from tribal lands alone, Varya relied on her tracking skills and the sparse directions Nara had whispered to her before her departure. The desert was treacherous to the uninitiated, but Varya had grown up reading its subtle signs: the pattern of dunes, the specific quality of the night wind, the stars overhead. Her first challenge came sooner than expected. Cresting a dune as dawn broke on her second day of travel, Varya spotted a band of desert raiders in the valley below. Their vehicles, a hodgepodge of salvaged metal and retrofitted engines, were unmistakable, as was their reputation for ruthlessness. Instinct told her to retreat, to find another route. But something made her pause, a flicker of intuition. If she wanted to understand Kale's cryptic message, perhaps she needed to face new challenges, not avoid them. Studying the raiders' camp, Varya noticed how they had positioned themselves, backs to a rocky outcropping, a natural barrier that protected them from behind, but also limited their escape routes. It was a standard defensive position, one she'd been taught in tribal training. But what if there was another way to view it? Instead of retreating or attempting to skirt around the camp, Varya began a careful approach from the direction of the outcropping itself. The rocks were treacherous, their surfaces uneven and sharp, but they offered handholds and concealment that the open desert did not. Heart-pounding, Varya scaled the outcropping, her movements slow and deliberate to avoid dislodging stones. From her elevated position, she could see the entire raider camp, 7 individuals, all armed, all dangerous, and completely unaware of her presence above them. In tribal tactics, this would be the moment to attack, to drop down and eliminate as many enemies as possible before they could react. But something held her back. Kale's words echoed in her mind. "You're holding it wrong." What if it wasn't just about the physical grip of her blade? What if it was about her entire approach? Varya scanned the camp again, this time looking beyond the raiders to what they had accumulated. Water containers, fuel canisters, preserved food, resources that would be valuable for her journey. Resources she could potentially acquire without bloodshed. Selecting a loose stone, Varya sent it tumbling down the far side of the outcropping, away from her position. The resulting clatter immediately drew the raiders' attention, several of them grabbing weapons and moving to investigate the disturbance. With their numbers divided, Varya made her move, not to attack, but to quickly and silently drop into the camp, retrieve a water container and a small pack of provisions, and then fade back into the rocks before the raiders returned from their investigation. The entire operation took less than a minute. By the time the raiders realized they'd been robbed, Varya was already making her way across the desert, heart racing with a strange mixture of triumph and revelation. She had accomplished her goal without drawing her blade. Without risking a confrontation, she might not have survived. Was this what Kale had meant? That sometimes the strongest grip was knowing when not to grip at all? The stolen provisions extended her journey, allowing Varya to venture further into territories unknown to her tribe. The landscape gradually shifted from endless dunes to rocky badlands, the remains of what might once have been a thriving ecosystem before whatever cataclysm had shaped this post-apocalyptic world. On the 5th day, she encountered her second major challenge, a sandstorm brewing on the horizon, its approach heralded by an ominous wall of dust that seemed to devour the sky itself. Tribal wisdom dictated finding shelter, hunkering down, and waiting out such storms. But the barren landscape offered little protection, and the nearest known shelter, a series of caves marked on the crude map Nara had provided, was still hours away. Varya made a split-second decision. Instead of seeking shelter, she would race the storm to the caves, using the fierce winds to propel her forward rather than pin her down. It was madness, of course. The stinging sand could flay skin from bone, and the disorienting whirl of particles could leave even experienced navigators lost forever in the wasteland. But something about this approach felt right. Felt like the kind of lesson Kale might approve of. Adjusting her scarf to protect her face and securing her belongings, Varya began to run, not away from the storm, but parallel to its advance, using its energy without being consumed by it. The wind howled around her, sand pelting against her protected skin. But she maintained her course, adjusting her movements with a newfound flexibility that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her training. Her lungs burned and her muscles screamed in protest. But Varya pressed on, reading the storm's patterns and adapting to its rhythms. When it shifted, she shifted. When it surged, she used the momentum to propel herself forward. Just as the full force of the storm was about to engulf her, Varya spotted the dark opening of the caves ahead. With a final burst of speed, she hurled herself into the shelter of stone, collapsing onto the cool ground as the world outside disappeared into a maelstrom of sand and fury. As her breathing slowed and her heart rate returned to normal, Varya realized something profound had changed within her. The rigid forms and unyielding principles she had been taught all her life suddenly seemed limiting, like a cage rather than a foundation. "Impressive," a voice echoed from deeper within the cave. Most people would have tried to outrun it or hide from it. Few would think to dance with it. Varya was on her feet in an instant, blade drawn and ready. The figure that emerged from the shadows wasn't Kale, as she had half expected, but a woman with sharp features and calculating eyes. "Who are you?" Varya demanded, keeping her blade steady. The woman smiled, unperturbed by the weapon. "My name is Seren. I'm a friend of Kyle's. And Nara's, for that matter." "You've been following me." "Observing," Seren corrected. "There's a difference. Following implies I'm always behind you. Sometimes I've been ahead, sometimes beside, watching how you handle yourself." Varya didn't lower her blade. "Why?" "Because Kale was right about you. You're different from the other tribal warriors. You adapt. You think." Seren gestured to the cave around them. "This place is more than shelter from the storm. It's a gateway." "To what?" "To the answers you're seeking." Seren moved deeper into the cave, clearly expecting Varya to follow. "About how you're holding your blade wrong, among other things. Curiosity, overcoming caution." Varya sheathed her weapon and followed Seren into the darkness of the cave. As they ventured deeper, the natural tunnel began to show signs of deliberate construction. Smooth walls, occasional light sources embedded in the stone, even crude symbols etched at regular intervals. "What is this place?" Varya asked, running her fingers over one of the symbols. "We call it the network," Seren explained. "A system of natural caves expanded and connected by those who saw the flaws in the current power structures, long before others did. People like Kale, like Nara. People who believe there's a better way than rigid hierarchies and violence for the sake of tradition." The tunnel eventually opened into a larger chamber, illuminated by a combination of natural light from ceiling fissures and artificial sources Varya couldn't identify. Several people moved about the space, engaged in various activities from map reading to weapon maintenance. "Welcome to Outpost 7, Seren announced, gesturing to the chamber at large. "One of many similar refugees throughout the desert territories." Varya took in the scene with mounting disbelief. "You're rebels!" "We prefer reformers," a familiar voice replied from across the chamber. Kale approached, looking exactly as he had in the canyon, confident, slightly amused, those storm-gray eyes assessing her with uncanny precision. "You," Varya breathed, her hand instinctively moving to her blade. Kale noticed the movement and smiled. "Still holding it wrong. I see." "Then teach me," she challenged, drawing the ancestral blade with a fluid motion. "Show me what you meant." The chamber fell silent, its occupants watching the exchange with varying degrees of interest. Kyle studied Varya for a long moment, before nodding once. Very well. He moved to a clear area of the chamber and gestured for her to join him. Attack me! Varya didn't hesitate. She lunged forward with the precise form she had been taught since childhood, her blade aimed for a killing strike that would end the confrontation immediately. Kale stepped aside with minimal movement, allowing her momentum to carry her past him. Before she could recover, he tapped a specific point on her wrist, the same point as before, and once again, the blade slipped from her grasp. Your tribe teaches the ancient form, Kyle said as Varya retrieved her weapon, frustration evident in her movements. Rigid, predictable, effective against opponents who fight the same way, useless against anyone who doesn't. The ancient form has served the tribe for generations, Varya countered, readying herself for another attempt, and kept them isolated, stagnant, and dwindling in a world that has moved beyond their understanding. Kale's tone wasn't mocking, but matter-of-fact. Try again. This time, don't think about the form. Think about me, what I might do, how you might adapt. Varya attacked again, this time attempting to anticipate Kale's evasion. He moved differently than she expected, but she adjusted mid-strike, maintaining her grip when he attempted the disarming tap. A flash of approval crossed Kale's face before he countered with a move of his own, one Varya had never seen before. She blocked it clumsily, but effectively. Better, Kale acknowledged. You're learning to see beyond the form. They continued like this for hours, Kyle demonstrating techniques that contradicted everything Varya had been taught, challenging her to adapt, to think, to flow like the desert wind rather than stand rigid like the canyon walls. By the time they finished, Varya was exhausted but exhilarated, her mind buzzing with new concepts and possibilities. Your tribe's way of holding the blade, of approaching combat, of viewing the world, is just one way among many, Kyle explained, as they sat recovering from their session. It served a purpose in its time, but the world has changed. Those who cannot adapt will perish. Is that why you're here, in these caves? Because you adapt? Varya asked. Kale exchanged a glance with Seren before responding. We're here because we recognize that the current systems, the tribal hierarchies, the royal government in the old cities, the raider bands, all of them are symptoms of a larger problem. A problem of rigid thinking, of clinging to power structures that no longer serve the people they're meant to protect. And what do you propose instead? A network of communities, independent but connected, governed by principles rather than personalities. Kale's eyes lit with passion as he spoke. A system that values adaptation, innovation, and cooperation over strength for its own sake. Varya considered his words, finding them both compelling and unsettling. And my tribe? Where do they fit in this vision of yours? That depends on their willingness to adapt. Kale studied her carefully. And on people like you, who might bridge the gap between old ways and new. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the chamber entrance. A breathless messenger arrived, speaking rapidly to Seren in hushed tones. Whatever news they brought caused Seren's expression to darken. What is it? Kale asked, rising to his feet. Tribal warriors, Seren replied grimly. A larger party than usual, led by their champion. They're searching the caves systematically. Varya felt a chill run through her. They're looking for me. No, Kale corrected, his expression hardening. They're looking for us. Your disappearance was just the catalyst. The tribal leaders have suspected our presence for some time. What do we do? Someone asked from across the chamber. We evacuate, Seren decided. Protocol 3. Everyone knows their routes and rendezvous points. The chamber erupted into organized chaos as people gathered essential supplies and began moving toward various exit tunnels. Kale turned to Varya, his expression unreadable. You have a choice to make, he said simply. Return to your tribe. Explain that you were captured. Perhaps regain some standing. Or come with us. learn more about what we're trying to build, and maybe help bridge the divide between our worlds. Varya hesitated, torn between the familiarity of tribal life and the intriguing possibilities Kale represented. Before she could respond, another messenger arrived, even more agitated than the first. "They've sealed the northern exits," the messenger reported, "and they have some kind of tracking device. They're heading straight for us." Kale cursed under his breath. "How many?" "At least 15, including their champion." Seren's expression turned grim. "We can't evacuate everyone in time. Some of us will need to stay behind, create a diversion." "I'll do it," Kyle volunteered immediately. "No," Varya interrupted, surprising herself with her vehemence. "Let me go. Alone." Both Kale and Seren stared at her in disbelief. "They're my people," Varya explained. "I know their tactics, their weaknesses, and they won't immediately attack one of their own." "It's too dangerous," Kyle argued. "Their champion won't hesitate to cut you down for desertion." "Maybe," Varya squared her shoulders. "But I need to try. You've shown me a new way to hold my blade. Let me see if I can use it to prevent bloodshed rather than cause it." A long moment of silence followed as Kale and Seren exchanged glances, conducting a silent conversation with their eyes. Finally, Kale nodded reluctantly. "Go," he said. "But know this. If you fail, if they get past you, we'll have no choice but to fight, and people will die on both sides." "I won't fail," Varya promised, gripping her blade with newfound determination. Seren provided rapid directions to intercept the tribal party before they reached the main chamber, and Varya set off at a run, her mind racing with possibilities and strategies. She found them in a wide tunnel junction, their torches casting long shadows against the rough-hewn walls. At their head stood Drayden, the tribal champion, a towering figure whose scarred visage was a testament to countless victories in combat. Varya stepped into their path, her ancestral blade held loosely at her side in a stance that would have earned her a beating from her tribal instructors. "Varya," Drayden's deep voice echoed in the tunnel. "The elders said you might have been taken. I see now you left willingly." His massive hand moved to the war axe strapped across his back. "You know the punishment for desertion." "I know many things I didn't before," Varya replied calmly, "including the fact that you're walking into a trap." This gave Drayden pause. "Explain." "These tunnels are home to the reformers, those your elders have taught you to fear and hate. There are dozens of them ahead, armed and waiting. They sent me to offer you a chance to retreat without bloodshed." A murmur ran through the tribal warriors. Drayden silenced them with a raised hand. "You expect me to believe the Desert Witch's lies? We tracked you here for a reason. Varya, the elders want answers about these caves, about the people who hide in them, and I intend to get those answers." His hand closed around the haft of his axe. "Step aside, or be cut down with the rest of them." Varya held her ground. "I can't do that." "Then you have chosen your fate." Drayden drew his massive axe in a single fluid motion, the weapon humming through the air with deadly intent. In that moment, everything Kale had taught her coalesced into perfect clarity. Varya didn't try to match Drayden's strength or counter with the rigid forms of tribal combat. Instead, she moved like water, like wind, adapting to each strike with minimal effort, redirecting rather than resisting. The tribal warriors watched in stunned silence as their champion, undefeated in tribal contests for over a decade, failed repeatedly to land a solid blow on Varya. His frustration grew with each missed strike, his movements becoming increasingly wild and predictable. "Fight me properly!" Drayden roared after yet another failed attack. "I am," Varya replied, sliding past his guard to tap the flat of her blade against his armored chest. "Just not in the way you were taught." Rage contorted Drayden's features. With a bellow that shook dust from the tunnel ceiling, he charged forward, axe raised for a killing blow. Varya waited until the last possible moment before stepping aside, extending her foot just enough to catch Drayden's ankle. The champion's momentum did the rest, sending him crashing to the ground, his axe clattering away into the shadows. Before he could recover, Varya had her blade at his throat, a perfect mirror of her encounter with Kale, but with their positions reversed. "Any last words?" she asked, her voice steady. Drayden glared up at her, hatred burning in his eyes. "Finish it, traitor!" "No." Varya stepped back, lowering her blade. "That's exactly what I'm not going to do," she addressed the gathered warriors, who stood frozen in disbelief. "I could kill your champion right now, by tribal law. That would make me champion in his place. I could order you all to leave these caves and never return." "Then do it," one of the warriors challenged. "Prove your strength." "Strength isn't just about who can kill whom," Varya replied, echoing Kale's teachings. "It's about knowing when not to kill, about finding better solutions than endless cycles of violence and revenge." Drayden had regained his feet, his expression a mixture of confusion and lingering rage. "What game are you playing, Varya?" "No game. A choice." She sheathed her blade in a deliberate gesture of trust. "You came here seeking answers about the people who live in these caves. Let me give you those answers. But not through bloodshed. Let me show you another way. A way that might ensure the tribe's survival in a changing world." A tense silence followed her words. Varya could feel the weight of generations of tribal tradition pressing against her proposal, the ingrained suspicion of anything different or new. Finally, an older warrior stepped forward. Varya recognized him as Kern, Drayden's second-in-command, and a respected voice in tribal councils. "The elders sent us to find answers," Kern said slowly. "They did not specify how those answers must be obtained." He looked to Drayden. "The choice is yours, champion, but I would hear what Varya has to say." Drayden's internal struggle was visible on his scarred face. Pride warred with curiosity, tradition with pragmatism. After what seemed an eternity, he gave a single, sharp nod. "Speak then," he commanded Varya. "But know that if your words prove false, or if these cave dwellers show any sign of treachery, we will not hesitate to fulfill our original purpose." "Fair enough," Varya agreed. She turned and called into the tunnel behind her. "Kyle! Seren! It's safe to approach." Moments later, Kale and Seren emerged from the shadows, their hands conspicuously empty of weapons. The tribal warriors tensed, but no one made a hostile move. "These are the people your elders fear," Varya explained. "Not raiders or enemies, but reformers who believe there's a better way forward for all of us. They've established a network throughout the desert territories, connecting communities, sharing resources and knowledge." "Sharing weakness, you mean?" Drayden scoffed. "The strong survive on their own." "Do they?" Kyle spoke for the first time, his voice calm and measured. "Your tribe's numbers have dwindled each generation. Your territory shrinks as resources become scarcer. How long before surviving on your own becomes extinction?" The blunt assessment struck a nerve. Even Drayden couldn't deny the truth of it. The tribal population had indeed decreased steadily over the years, with fewer children born, and more warriors lost to the harsh realities of desert life. "What alternative do you propose?" Kern asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "Alliance," Seren answered simply. "Not subjugation, not assimilation, but cooperative strength. Your warriors' skills combined with our knowledge of the old technologies. Your tribal lands joined with our network of outposts and supply routes." "The elders would never agree to such a thing," Drayden stated flatly. "Perhaps not all of them," Varya conceded, "but some might, if presented with the evidence of its benefits." She looked meaningfully at Kern, whose thoughtful expression suggested he was at least considering the possibility. "What evidence?" another warrior asked. "Words are easy. Proof is harder." "Then, let us show you," Kyle offered. "Come to our main chamber. See what we've built here." Judge for yourselves whether it threatens your tribe or offers a path to mutual survival. The proposal hung in the air, radical and unprecedented. Tribal warriors entering a reformer outpost not as conquerors, but as guests. It violated countless traditions and taboos. Yet, something had shifted in the atmosphere of the tunnel. Varya's demonstration against Drayden had done more than just spare lives. It had opened a crack in the rigid certainty of tribal superiority. If their champion could be defeated by a different approach to combat, might their entire worldview benefit from exposure to different ideas? Drayden's decision, when it came, was grudging but decisive. We will see this chamber of yours, but our weapons stay with us, and at the first sign of treachery, there will be none, Kyle assured him, extending a hand in the universal gesture of peace. After a moment's hesitation, Drayden clasped it, not as a friend, not yet, but as a potential ally in a world that grew more dangerous by the day. As the unlikely procession made its way deeper into the cave system, Varya found herself walking beside Kale, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the narrow passage. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen, Kale murmured, low enough that only she could hear. I learned from the best, Varya replied with the ghost of a smile. Sometimes the strongest grip is knowing when to let go. Kale's eyes crinkled at the corners, that familiar, almost smile playing at his lips. Now you're holding it right? The main chamber's reaction to the arrival of tribal warriors was predictably tense, but Seren's calm authority kept the situation from escalating. With practiced efficiency, she organized a demonstration of the outpost's capabilities, their water purification systems, their renewable energy solutions, their communications network that linked to other outposts throughout the desert. The tribal warriors observed with varying degrees of skepticism and interest. Some, like Drayden, maintained rigid postures and suspicious glares. Others, particularly the younger ones, couldn't hide their fascination with technologies they had only heard about in legends of the world before the cataclysm. Kern, true to his reputation for wisdom, asked pointed questions about practical matters. How would an alliance work? What would each side contribute? How would disputes be resolved? Seren and Kale answered honestly, acknowledging challenges and uncertainties while emphasizing the potential benefits of combined strength. As the impromptu diplomatic session continued, Varya found herself drawn to a quiet corner of the chamber, where Elder Rael sat observing the proceedings with enigmatic eyes. You knew, Varya accused without preamble. You knew about all of this. The elder's weathered face creased in a smile. I suspected. There have been whispers for years about a network in the caves. Whispers some of us chose to investigate rather than dismiss. Some of you? There are others in the tribe who know about the reformers? Knowledge takes many forms. Child, Nara is not the only one who ventures beyond tribal lands, though she is perhaps the most obvious. Elder Rael gestured to the chamber at large. What do you see here, truly? Varya considered the question, looking beyond her initial impressions to the essence of what the reformers had created. I see adaptation, flexibility, taking the best of old ways and new technologies and creating something that works for the present, not just the past or future. Precisely. Elder Rael nodded in approval. The very lesson Kale tried to teach you in the canyon, you're holding it wrong, wasn't just about your blade, was it? No, Varya acknowledged. It was about my entire approach, about clinging to forms and traditions without understanding their purpose or questioning their continued relevance. A lesson our tribe sorely needs, the elder admitted with a sigh. We have held too tightly to the ways of our ancestors, refusing to adapt even as the world changed around us. It has brought us to the brink of extinction. But why send me after Kale if you suspected the truth? Why not approach the reformers directly? Because our tribe needs more than just an alliance with outsiders. It needs transformation from within. Elder Rael fixed Varya with a penetrating gaze. "It needs leaders who understand both the value of tradition and the necessity of change. Leaders like you." The weight of the elder's words settled on Varya's shoulders, a burden and an honor simultaneously. Before she could formulate a response, a commotion near the chamber entrance drew their attention. A new group had arrived, not tribal warriors or reformer allies, but figures in the unmistakable regalia of the royal government, the distant authority that claimed sovereignty over all desert territories, while rarely venturing beyond the crumbling walls of the old cities. At their head stood a tall woman whose ornate uniform marked her as a high-ranking official. Her cold eyes surveyed the chamber with calculated interest, lingering on the unusual sight of tribal warriors and reformers engaged in apparently peaceful discussion. "Well, well," the official remarked, her voice carrying easily through the suddenly silent chamber. "This is unexpected. Representatives of the Highland tribe and the network gathered in one convenient location." She smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. "Saves us the trouble of hunting you down separately." Kale moved forward, his posture casual but alert. "Commander Voss, you're a long way from the capital." "The capital's interests extend wherever threats to order are found," Commander Voss replied smoothly. "And what could be more threatening than tribal savages and technology thieves forming an alliance?" "We're neither savages nor thieves," Varya countered, stepping up beside Kale. "And any alliance we form is our business, not yours." Voss's eyes narrowed at Varya's defiance. "All affairs within the territories are the business of the royal government, particularly when they involve restricted technologies and tribal movements outside designated areas." She gestured to her subordinates. "Secure the chamber. Detain the leaders for questioning. The rest will be processed according to protocol." The royal soldiers moved to obey, drawing weapons with mechanical precision. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted instantly from cautious diplomacy to imminent violence. Drayden's hand moved to his reclaimed axe. "We take no orders from city dwellers." "And we don't submit to illegal detainment," Seren added, her voice hard. Commander Voss sighed with theatrical disappointment. "Always the difficult way with you people." "Very well." She raised a hand, and her soldiers adopted combat stances. "Take them, alive if possible, but I won't quibble over a few casualties." What happened next would later be recounted in tribal stories and reformer records as the miracle of Outpost 7, the moment when ancient enemies stood together against a common threat. Without verbal coordination, tribal warriors and reformer operatives moved in concert, forming a defensive perimeter that protected non-combatants while presenting a united front to the royal soldiers. Years of mutual suspicion dissolved in the face of immediate danger, replaced by the pragmatic recognition that survival required cooperation. Varya found herself at the center of this unprecedented alliance, her ancestral blade drawn not in the rigid form of tribal combat, but in the fluid, adaptive style Kale had taught her. Beside her stood Drayden, his massive axe complementing her quicker movements, while Kale and Seren coordinated the reformers' more technical defenses. Commander Voss's confident expression faltered, as she realized the situation had shifted from a simple detention operation to a potential battlefield where her forces were outnumbered. "This is treason against the crown," she warned, though her voice had lost some of its authority. "This is self-determination," Kale corrected. "Something your government claims to support in theory, but suppresses in practice. We don't seek conflict with the royal government, but we won't surrender our freedom to live as we choose." "The tribe stands with the reformers on this," Drayden declared, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. The statement, unthinkable mere hours ago, now seemed the only logical position. Confronted with unexpected unity and diminishing odds, Commander Voss made a strategic decision. "This isn't over," she promised, signaling her soldiers to fall back. "The royal government doesn't tolerate insurrection. We'll return with forces sufficient to remind you all of your proper place in the order of things. Or, Varya suggested, stepping forward with her blade held in a non-threatening position. You could return with a different message, one of potential alliance rather than subjugation. Voss scoffed. The royal government doesn't form alliances with subjects. Then perhaps it's time for that to change as well, Varya pressed. The old world is gone, Commander. The cataclysm saw to that. Clinging to systems that no longer serve anyone's interests, not even yours, is as foolish as... She smiled slightly. As holding a blade wrong and wondering why it keeps slipping from your grasp. Something flickered in Voss's eyes. Not agreement. Not yet. But a momentary crack in absolute certainty. I'll convey your perspective to my superiors. That's all I can promise. It's a start, Kale acknowledged. Safe journey back to the capital, Commander. With a final assessing glance around the chamber, Voss departed with her soldiers, leaving behind an atmosphere electric with possibility and apprehension. They'll be back, Seren stated the obvious once the royal contingent was gone. And in greater numbers. Then we'd better prepare, Drayden replied, surprising everyone with his continued alliance. The tribe has warriors to contribute to this cause. And we have technology and resources, Kyle added. Together, we might actually stand a chance. Elder Rael, who had observed the confrontation from his quiet corner, finally spoke. What we witnessed today is more significant than any of you yet realize. 3 disparate groups, tribal, reformer, royal, each representing a different approach to power and governance. The rigid hierarchy of the tribe, the adaptive network of the reformers, the centralized authority of the royal government. The elder rose to his feet, suddenly seeming taller and more commanding than his years should allow. The future of our people, of all people in these territories, will be determined by which of these approaches prevails, or whether a new synthesis can emerge from their conflict. His gaze settled on Varya. You stand at the center of this potential synthesis. Child, your journey began with a blade held wrong, and may end with a new way of holding power altogether. The weight of this prophecy settled over the chamber, lending gravity to what had already been a day of unprecedented events. Tribal warriors and reformer operatives looked at one another with new eyes, seeing potential allies, where before they had seen only enemies. In the days and weeks that followed, Varya found herself in the unlikely role of diplomat, traveling between tribal lands and reformer outposts, building bridges of understanding and cooperation. It was exhausting, often frustrating work, as generations of mutual suspicion didn't dissolve overnight. But slowly, incrementally, progress was made. Small joint operations proved the benefits of cooperation, more efficient water harvesting, better defended settlements, expanded trade routes. Each success built momentum for further collaboration. The royal government, true to Commander Voss's warning, did not remain idle. Patrols increased along the borders of tribal lands, and reformer communications occasionally reported interference or surveillance. Yet, no direct confrontation materialized, suggesting that Varya's words might have found some fertile ground in the capital after all. 3 months after the standoff at Outpost 7, Varya found herself standing at the edge of the tribal encampment, watching the sun set over the desert in a blaze of familiar crimson. The ancestral blade hung at her hip, comfortable now in its adapted grip, neither purely tribal nor reformer, but something uniquely her own. A presence beside her broke her reverie. Kale, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the sunset's fire, stood regarding her with that almost smile she had come to know so well. The Tribal Council has agreed to send representatives to the network's central gathering, he informed her. Even the most conservative elders are beginning to see the wisdom of alliance. And the royal government? Varya asked. Still watching, still waiting. But Voss has been making informal inquiries about possible negotiations. Kale shrugged. It's something. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the day's final light fade from the sky. I never thanked you, Varya said eventually. For what? For disarming me in that canyon. For showing me I was holding it wrong. Kale's smile deepened. You've more than repaid that lesson. What you've accomplished here, bringing the tribe and the network together, standing up to the royal government. It's beyond what any of us thought possible. It's just the beginning, Varya reminded him. There will be setbacks, resistance from all sides. The path forward isn't clear. It never is, Kale agreed. That's precisely why rigid forms and unchanging traditions fail. The world changes, continuously and unpredictably. Only those who adapt survive. Varya drew her blade, holding it up to catch the last gleam of sunset. The ancestral weapon, symbol of tribal tradition and heritage, seemed transformed in her new grip, balanced differently, alive with new potential. Not just survival, she corrected, watching the play of light along the blade's edge. Adaptation isn't merely about avoiding extinction. It's about finding better ways to live, to grow, to protect what matters without destroying what could be. Kale's hand covered hers on the blade's hilt, warm and steady. Now you're holding it exactly right. Together, they stood at the threshold between tribal lands and the open desert beyond, between ancient traditions and future possibilities, holding a blade that was no longer just a weapon, but a symbol of transformation, a key to unlock doors, long thought sealed by the rigid structures of the past. In the deepening twilight, Varya could almost see the outlines of that future taking shape. Not a perfect world, but one where different approaches could coexist and complement rather than conflict. A world where "you're holding it wrong" wasn't an insult, but an invitation to growth and change. It was, she decided, a future worth fighting for, worth living for, worth transforming oneself to create. With a fluid motion that would have shocked her former self, Varya sheathed the ancestral blade and turned away from the sunset, ready to face whatever challenges the new dawn would bring. Behind her, Kyle's voice followed, soft but certain. Now you're holding it right.